On the morning of August 6, 1945, the sun rose over Japan like it always did. People woke up, children got ready for school, shop owners opened their doors, trains ran on time. Life felt normal. No one looked at the sky and thought, this is the last normal morning humanity will ever know. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the sun fell. Not a meteor, not a storm, not a god. A weapon made by humans. In less than 1 second, a single bomb erased a city. Hiroshima disappeared. What happened that day is often explained in numbers. 70,000 dead instantly. Tens of thousands more burned, blinded, poisoned. A temperature hotter than the surface of the sun. But numbers don't scream. Numbers don't beg for water. Numbers don't leave shadows burned into concrete. People do. And today, we are not here to justify. We are not here to accuse. We are here to understand. Because the atomic bomb was not just a weapon, it was a decision made by tired leaders, exhausted soldiers, terrified generals, and scientists who were racing against time. A decision made in fear. World War II had already killed over 60 million people. Europe was destroyed, cities were rubble, families were gone. But in the Pacific, the war was far from over. Japan was not surrendering, not after fire bombings, not after starvation, not after losing islands, fleets, and air power. The Japanese military believed surrender was worse than death, and America knew something terrifying. If they invaded Japan directly, millions would die. Not hundreds of thousands, millions. American soldiers, Japanese civilians, teenagers, elderly people, children trained to fight with bamboo spears. This wasn't theory. This was planned reality. In Washington, maps were covered with red markers. Each marker meant bodies. In hospitals, doctors prepared for casualties they knew they couldn't save. And in secret laboratories across the United States, a different kind of fear was growing. A fear that if America didn't build the bomb first, someone else would. Nazi Germany had chased nuclear weapons. Now the Soviet Union was racing too. Time was running out. So America did something humanity had never done before. They built a weapon not to defeat an army, but to end a war instantly. At least that was the hope. The men who built the bomb didn't all agree with using it. Some begged for a demonstration instead of a city. Some feared opening a door that could never be closed. Some believed this invention would haunt mankind forever. But once the bomb existed, it demanded an answer. If we can end the war today, should we? And if we don't, how many more must die tomorrow? Hiroshima was chosen, not because it was the most evil city, not because it was the most important, but because it was still standing, untouched enough to measure destruction clearly. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb exploded 900 feet above the city. People closest to it didn't burn. They vanished. Further away, skin melted, eyes boiled, shadows burned into walls where people once stood. And then came the silence. A silence so complete. Survivors said it felt like the world had ended. 3 days later, Japan still had not surrendered. So a second bomb fell. Nagasaki. And after that, something broke. Not just Japan, humanity. For the first time, we understood that we now possessed the power to erase ourselves. This video is not about who was right. It is about what happened, why it happened, and what it cost. Because the atomic bomb did end World War II. But it also began something else. The nuclear age. The age of fear. The age where one decision could end the world. And the question we still haven't answered is simple. Was it victory? Or was it the moment humanity crossed a line it can never uncross? To understand why the atomic bomb was dropped, we must first understand something deeper. Why Japan did not surrender. Not after defeat, not after destruction, not even after the country was burning. Because this war was not just military, it was psychological. In Imperial Japan, surrender was not seen as survival. It was seen as shame. A shame worse than death. From childhood, Japanese soldiers were taught one truth. To be captured alive was dishonor. To surrender was betrayal. To die for the emperor was the highest honor. This wasn't propaganda alone. It was culture. It was identity. The emperor was not just a leader. He was divine. And dying in his name meant immortality. American intelligence quickly realized something terrifying. They were not fighting an army that wanted to live. They were fighting an army trained to die. By 1944, Japan's situation was hopeless. Their navy was shattered. Their air force was bleeding pilots faster than it could train them. Fuel was gone. Supplies were collapsing. Yet, Japan did not surrender. Instead, they changed tactics. They turned death into a weapon. Kamikaze pilots began crashing planes directly into American ships, not because they were forced, but because many volunteered. Young men, sometimes teenagers, wrote farewell letters to their families, drank ceremonial cups of sake, and climbed into planes knowing they would never return. American sailors watched in horror. These pilots were not retreating. They were smiling. Then came Iwo Jima, a small island, no civilians, no escape. American planners expected the battle to last days. It lasted 5 weeks. Japanese soldiers hid underground, refusing to reveal themselves until American troops were close enough to die with them. Out of 21,000 Japanese defenders, almost none surrendered, not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Then came Okinawa, and everything changed. Okinawa was not just a battlefield. It was home. Civilians lived there, and Japan turned them into weapons, too. Japanese civilians were told American soldiers were monsters. That surrender meant torture. That capture meant humiliation worse than death. Parents were told to kill their children before Americans could reach them. Some did, others jumped off cliffs together. Entire families chose death over surrender. American soldiers were not prepared for this. They had fought Nazis. They had liberated camps. They had seen horror. But this was different. Here, even civilians fought or died, and Okinawa became the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. Over 200,000 people died. More than half were civilians. After Okinawa, American commanders reached a horrifying conclusion. If Japan fought like this on a small island, how would they fight on their homeland? The planned invasion of Japan had a name: Operation Downfall. It would be the largest amphibious invasion in history, larger than D-Day. American casualty estimates ranged from 100,000 to over 1 million dead or wounded. Japanese losses were expected to be even worse: millions. Civilians included, children armed with sharpened sticks, elderly men trained to charge tanks, the entire nation prepared to die. One American general later said, "It would have been a slaughter for both sides. This wasn't fear, this was math." And still, Japan did not surrender. Even after American firebombing destroyed Tokyo, even after cities burned night after night, even after starvation began spreading, the military leadership believed one thing: if they could cause enough American deaths, America would negotiate. They were willing to sacrifice the nation to preserve honor. This was the reality facing American leadership in 1945. Not a defeated enemy, but a cornered one. An enemy willing to let its people die. So when American leaders asked the question, how do we end this war? They weren't asking it lightly. They were asking it knowing. Every option meant death. The only question was scale, and that question led them to a weapon the world had never seen before. A weapon designed not to defeat Japan's army, but to break its will. In the next chapter, we'll go inside the most secret project in human history. A project so dangerous, even the scientists who built it weren't sure humanity should survive it. By 1944, many Americans believed the war was almost over. Germany was collapsing in Europe. Allied troops were marching forward. Victory felt close, but on the other side of the world, America was bleeding. The Pacific War was nothing like Europe. There were no front lines, no clear victories, only islands soaked in blood. Every island the Americans captured cost thousands of lives. Not because Japan was stronger, but because Japan refused to give up ground. Every inch had to be taken by force. Take Tarawa, a tiny island, barely visible on a map. The invasion was supposed to take hours. It took days. American Marines were cut down in the open, wading through water filled with bodies. By the end, over 1,000 Americans were dead for an island that was barely usable. And this was only the beginning. Then came Saipan. When American troops pushed inland, Japanese soldiers didn't retreat. They charged. One final attack, a suicide assault. Thousands ran directly into machine guns. The ground was covered with bodies, and when the fighting ended, civilians followed. Women, children, entire families. They walked to the cliffs and jumped because surrender was unthinkable. American soldiers watched this happen. Many would later say this was the moment they realized this war would never end normally. Then came Iwo Jima, an island of ash and stone. The ground was hollow, tunnels beneath tunnels. The Japanese didn't defend the beaches. They waited, let the Americans land. Then they opened fire. Every hill was a fortress, every cave a trap. American soldiers stopped seeing progress in miles. They measured it in feet, sometimes inches. One Marine later said, "You didn't fight an enemy. You fought the ground itself." By the end of Iwo Jima, nearly 7,000 Americans were dead. Almost all of the 21,000 Japanese defenders were killed. Very few surrendered. The message was clear. This enemy would not break. And then, Okinawa. Okinawa was different. It was not just a battlefield. It was a home. Families lived there. Children played there. And the fighting lasted 82 days. Rain turned the ground into mud. Bodies sank into it. The sky was never quiet. Naval guns, artillery, planes crashing into ships. Kamikaze attacks reached their peak. Hundreds of planes dove directly into American fleets. Sailors didn't fear being shot. They feared being burned alive, trapped below decks. By the end of Okinawa, over 12,000 Americans were dead. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers killed. More than 100,000 civilians dead. It was one of the bloodiest battles in American history. And Okinawa was just a preview, because Okinawa was not Japan. It was only the doorstep. American commanders now faced reality. If capturing a small island cost this much, what would capturing an entire nation cost? Soldiers wrote letters home. Some wrote goodbye letters. Others asked their families to prepare for the worst. One soldier wrote, "If they make us invade Japan, I don't think many of us are coming back." Military planners ran the numbers again and again. Every calculation ended the same way. Too many dead. This wasn't cowardice. It was experience. The Pacific War had taught America a brutal truth. Japan would fight until the last man, and maybe the last child. So when people ask, why didn't America just keep fighting? This is the answer. Because fighting meant a level of death the world had never seen. The question was no longer, how do we win? It was, how do we stop this from becoming the greatest slaughter in human history? And somewhere far from the battlefield, behind locked doors, under fake names, a group of scientists were working on something that promised an answer, something terrifying, something final. In the next chapter, we enter the most secret project ever created, a project so dangerous, even its creators feared it. This is the full story of why America dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. Not the version from textbooks, not the version from propaganda, the human story.